One of the things that I always say out loud is, now that you've done more than 5,000 strategies for people, right? I've seen a lot of how people save and what sort of savings do they look like.
I have a strong belief that nobody cares more about your money than you do.
So I've crunched the numbers, I've brought down the numbers. People should spend 30% of their money towards portfolio, so building up their life, okay?
Co-living properties can generate almost $140,000 in passive income and net of $40,000 in passive income after mortgage repayments, and they sit in an average yield of about 10%.
Hello and welcome to another episode of Help Me Buy Property Podcast. Today's podcast is a journey from PAYG income earner to an investor's way business owner. Now, this is a business of creating financial independence, of teaching people how to go about being financially independent. I have my wonderful friend and my co-host today, Andrew Woodard, founder of Investors Way today. Andrew, how are you?
Oh, very well. And thank you for having me on this fantastic podcast.
Thank you very much. So, chartered accountant turned business owner, starting up an Investors Way. How does, talk to me a bit about yourself first.
It's almost a case of how long have we got? And also, my journey actually started when I was 14. And I was fortunate enough to be very good at the sport of squash.
Yeah.
And I played men's comp as a 14-year-old kid. And a squash team was made up of 5 people. So for 6 months, they were in my ear constantly about, you've got to get your money working for you. And they just planted a seed. I didn't realize at the time that's what they were doing. They were planting this seed of, you've got to get your money working for you. You've got to learn how to invest.
Yeah.
And fortunately and unfortunately, I was getting that message. But then I went home to a household that was about scarcity. So I was getting very mixed messages, obviously.
Yeah.
So fast forward to I got my first job, and as soon as money hit my bank account, I made sure I got rid of it and developed all those bad habits. Yeah. Then I got married quite young. I was married at 23, and I'm now responsible for not just me, but a family. And I came home from work one day, and I opened up all this mail, and I thought it was very popular on this day because there was lots of mail. But it turned out most of them were bills. And I was doing the mental math as I'm opening up all of these bills and realized that I had spent more money than I actually earned in the month.
Yeah.
And it was the turning point where I realized that it was about time I actually got that seed that had been planted so many years ago and fertilized it.
Yeah.
And so I went about learning. I went and attended all the workshops and all the books I could read and all the people I could study. I decided that was the turning point, and I had to do something different. And I worked my way out of debt, and then I worked my way into investments. And by the age of 38, I'd made my first $1 million.
Amazing.
And I knew I was on a path from that point forward. And then I had a very pivotal moment that led to the commencement of the Investors Way. I knew there was more to life than just working 9 to 5. And I was building my investments and that was all going really well, but I knew there was more to life. You and I had both got 24 hours of the day.
Yeah.
You've got one job. Surely you can do more. And he challenged me to teach people what I've been doing for my own wells. So that happened on a Wednesday, and by the Saturday, I'd registered the business name, The Investor's Way. And before I knew it, I was building a business, teaching people how to manage and grow their wealth the way I'd done it for myself.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. And it's always interesting, right? I love entrepreneurs, stories, right? Everyone has that pivotal moment on something that gets triggered and taking them through into the journey of. And I feel that a lot of successful business owners or business entrepreneurs are people who find their why, right? And once you find that why and you know that this is what I was born to do, then it starts coming naturally, right? You start basically going into that space. Thank you for sharing. Talk to a bit about why not financial advice, why not financial planning, why education?
The reason is that I have a strong belief that nobody cares more about your money than you do.
Both.
And therefore, why would you outsource it to somebody else? I get why a lot of people do it. And it's because time is a problem, knowledge is a problem.
Yeah.
And ultimately, responsibility is also a problem.
Yes.
And people, if they have somebody else that they can blame if it goes wrong, that's okay. If it's them, then it's a different conversation. But I honestly believe that there's a lot of people out there who would be more comfortable if they were in control of their own money.
Yeah.
And it's actually why a lot of people don't do either. Either get educated or get somebody else to do it for them. They do nothing.
Yeah.
Because they're fearful of losing control. So the educational piece is very much about empowering people to manage and grow their wealth themselves. And that doesn't just grow their wealth, it grows their core freaks.
Yeah.
And when I started this business a little over 9 years ago, I was referred to 2 books. So the first one's called Where Are All the Customers' Yachts?
Yeah.
And it's a fable about 2 guys who went to school together. And one of them grew up to be a financial advisor and the other one was doing something else. And they catch up in New York to go to lunch. And they're walking towards the harbour and the non-financial advisor buddy says to his mate, looks out to the harbour, he sees all of these yachts in the harbour. He says, who owns all those yachts? And his financial advisor buddy looks at him and says, well, that's the financial advisors.
Yeah.
And his non-financial advisor buddy says, well, where are all the customers' yachts? Yeah. And the financial advisor looks at him with this really intrigued and dumbfounded look. So what are you talking about? The clients don't get towed in the yachts, it's the advisors.
Yeah.
And that kind of goes on to explain, how does that make sense? Why is it that the advisors are making all the money and not the client? So that book really stuck with me. And the person who referred it to me has been a long time friend. We don't necessarily catch up all the time, but he's in the back of my mind all the time. He lives here in Melbourne.
Yeah.
And so that was the first book. And I thought, okay, that sent me a message. And then Tony Robbins, like you will love him, I'm kind of on the fence.
Yeah.
He released Unshakable.
Yeah.
As a book, 250 pages. But the first 92 pages, he explains why people should get a financial literacy education. And towards the back of those 92 pages, he does the maths to explain the impact on your wealth of the advisor's fees.
Yeah.
So I like to think that my role in my business is to empower those people with the knowledge, the skills, the resources, and ultimately the confidence to grow their wealth themselves.
So what type of people come in and talk to you? What's the age bracket? Are you talking about, youngsters who are in their 20s or people who are in their 40s and 50s? What's the demographic?
So 90% of my clients are 40 to 55. Okay. My youngest client is now 18. She was 16 when she asked her parents she explained to her parents that she had 5 goals that she wanted to achieve by her 23rd birthday.
No.
And all of them required money. And I knew her parents, and so they said, look, would you teach her how to get these 5 goals ticked off? Because she won't listen to us.
Yeah.
And she might listen to you. So she was 16 at the time. She's now 18. She's ticked 2 of the 5 off. And she has a 5-figure stock portfolio, all from working in a cafe. She's left school now and she's earning a bit more money. But yeah, so that's a story I love to tell. But 90%, coming back to your main question, 90%, 40 to 55, generally earning a reasonable income. And mindful that they need to do something. So some of them are planning ahead, saying, I need to get ahead and make sure I'm ready for retirement. And some of them, if I can say it, have had the oh-shit moment, where they've gone, my numbers are just not what they need to be for me to be able to retire. And I don't want to work forever, so I need to do something.
Yeah.
Having said that, if I could get them younger, I'd be so happy because, that time risk is not there. But what we do find when we get some of the younger demographic into our world is that they have a general belief that they can learn everything off YouTube.
Yes.
Or TikTok or wherever it might be.
And don't get yourself taken on a ride by property spookers, so-called property investment advisors, or buyer's agents who are selling house and land packages, or off-the-plan properties or apartments. Get yourself a copy of this book called The Millennial's Guide to Property Investing. This book is not just for millennials. The title suggests, but it's actually the most advanced way of investing in property. This book will relate to your clients, your colleagues, and other business owners. There are so many property spookers out there who have come out of the woodwork over the last 3 to 5 years, and there is so much misinformation out there that I had to write a book about all the F-ups that people can actually avoid in order to be super successful in their property investment journey. Some of these are really easy to identify, but they are so costly to fix once these mistakes are made. So it's a short book, it's easy to read, it has a lot of stories, it has a lot of examples, and it is a true guide for people who wants to do it themselves. My name is Moxin Reza. This is my story, and a lot of you will relate to parts of this story if you're not born in the riches and if you're trying to build a property portfolio that can last generations and help you improve your lifestyle along the way. So I give you a chance to come out there and have a read. Be kind, stay safe, keep smiling, keep investing, and please do check out the book. Look, I mean, to a certain extent, that's true as well, right? I think a mentor, Minji, and, I'm going to give him a shout out for this episode as well. He always says this, right? That when you think about a problem, go on Amazon and spend $15 and someone would spend their lifetime solving that problem for you and writing a 30-page or a 50-page or 100-page book, right?
Yeah.
So it's true. But the problem is that there is so much noise in the riffraff that in order to find the right answer, is almost impossible. Or for you, it would take years and years to basically hit and miss years before you actually come to.
And that's one of the things I say to people all the time is that let me teach you to not make the mistakes that I made. None for Scott. I've made them all. And I made them all before I was 30. I often talk about the time where I lost $48,000 in the markets in 90 minutes. There's big numbers that are big mistakes I've made, so I can teach people not to make those mistakes.
Yeah.
The other thing, and you're totally right, there's nothing that I necessarily teach that you can't learn for free.
Yeah.
But you can also learn to swim on YouTube. But until you jog in the water, you can't swim.
100%.
And it's no different with investing. Until you pull that trigger, you don't know how you're going to react. You don't know how all those things that are bubbling up in your head are going to trigger all those different emotions that potentially will derail you, because ultimately, I believe 95% of success with money is about what's going on between your ears, not necessarily the strategy. So you can get all the strategy, you can get all the tools and resources, but you can't deal with what's going on. And part of my journey is sharing how I overcome all of those mindset restrictions that prevented me in my early years from overcoming those hurdles.
Yeah. And that's what it comes down to. I think a lot of people are responding to their fear of losing. It's not just, the winning side that basically scares them. A lot of people don't do anything, or the opportunity cost of not doing anything is because the fear of losing, right? They might have X amount of money and they're like, if we do something, we might end up even losing this, right? And it's putting themselves out there or putting them in the position. And I love this, when you say that no one can learn to swim from reading a book, right? You need to enter into the call. You need to hold someone's hand. You need to have a teacher in place and mentor, right? So education, while important, it's also important to have that person who has been there, done that, and learn from the best, right? So, yeah.
And it's no different to, I'm a massive sports geek.
Yeah.
And if you look at any elite athlete out there, they've got multiple coaches. And all I'm basically offering people is to be that coach So I can deal a little bit with the mindset side of things and also the strategy and the tactics and the tools so that you can overcome all that noise that's out in the markets. Because unfortunately, when it comes to money and investing, there's an enormous amount of noise. And what we want to do is remove the noise, because ultimately another one of my beliefs is that investing is actually quite simple.
Yeah.
Accumulate investment grade assets. We're on a property podcast. Accumulate investment grade properties and you'll get to hundreds. And so all the noise, all the complications, all the fancy stuff, you can put that aside. I often joke that if an investment requires a 100-page document to explain all the risks to me, it's probably a little bit too complicated.
Yeah.
And so
definitely
keep it simple.
Yeah. And fundamentally right? I think that's what go back to fundamentals. Warren Buffett says this all the time, go back to fundamental, do it fundamentally right, understand the dynamics, don't try chasing the markets, don't try chasing the next shiny new thing, right? Go back to the basics and you can never go wrong. Like I think with property, it's quite obvious, right? Property grows in value it doubles in value every 12 to 15 years, right? No matter what you buy, right? Even graves, to that extent, I bought graves.
Yeah.
And, I think 2016, they were selling at $1,650. They're now selling at $9,500, right? So again, I'm not saying to people go out there, buy graves or investments, but it's a no-brainer, right? Again, fundamentally, if you think about it, immense demand, almost struggled supplies. Of course, it's going to go one way. And so when you talk about properties, the fundamental of property is basically that don't buy, that property, don't buy. And so I think when it comes to investing, I totally agree. The rules of demand and supply typically applies to any investment class. You just need to make sure that, you're not chasing the next golden goose or the shiny fin, right?
And that's part of our problem is that for those people who haven't gone down the financial advisor or planner route, a lot of their financial knowledge comes from family and friends.
Yeah.
And I've lost count of the amount of times that people have told me that they bought a stock because a mate told them to do it or told them about something, and it's not ended well.
Yeah.
And that's because it's, like you said, it's not based on fundamentals. Warren Buffett, I'm a massive fanboy. And I've built my stock selection criteria around how he assesses businesses. And I have the tools that you have to do what I did when I first started, which was keep an Excel spreadsheet of the stuff and try and monitor it. And then by the time you finished it, the data updates. Now we can do that with modern technology so quickly that I can take the Australian market from 2,300 stocks to 4 in a matter of milliseconds using the tools and the data fundamentals based on how Warren Buffett assesses a stock.
A lot of this was not available, right? Before you take yourself 10 years ago and we were literally doing it on spreadsheets and paper, right? So I remember, doing the brand work, etc., even in the property space, right? So a lot of this data was not available. A lot of these tools was not available. And so it's such a shame that even though that the tools are available, it's actually taking a lot of investors backwards, because they feel so overwhelmed because not only they don't know how to use the tools, it's almost like, Jesus, now you have 10,000 different tools available, 10,000 different things. And so again, coming back to your point, there's so much noise out there that people, instead of making the right decision, they're even more confused, and that analysis paralysis approach, comes in all the time, stopping people to actually taking a more proactive approach at investing.
And I can see it already happening with AI tools.
Yes, if you have, yeah.
And so we're just laying on, I used to, I bought my first property using data that came from a quarterly magazine.
Yeah.
And now you can get that data from a whole host of different tools.
Yeah.
But I can see it happening with AI where people are going to say, well, I'll just run this through an AI tool of some sort and that will tell me all the answers. But unfortunately, it will give you something, but unless you know what it's producing and why, then you'll be no better off than you were before the AI tool was there. So having the knowledge of what makes a good investment and what other pieces of information I need to make a good investment decision is then enhanced with the tools. But the tools don't replace the knowledge.
Yeah. And again, people tend to, talk down about the AI. Someone is programming that AI, right? Someone is out there was taught AI to think like a human. And so there is a particular human that they have in mind when they're making the AI think like that human or that way of thinking, right? Yeah, so it's not that, okay, go and think like 7 billion humans, right? And so that's what people don't understand. When you talk about AI tools, it's a particular way of mindset, particular way of thinking. Someone has trained this AI to think methodologically, in a particular algorithmic way, right? And that's what it comes down to. And a lot of people don't understand that. They think that, AI is the next best thing after white bread, right? So, they think that this is going to solve all the problems, right?
Well, you and I have had the conversation about a little group of people that you're a part of that get into the data of own property.
Yes.
And even that little group has different ways of how do I see the same piece of information.
Yeah.
So, like I was saying, like the tools are great, but I've got to have that background knowledge to understand the outputs to enable you to then make good investing decisions.
100%. So for viewers and listeners, let's dive a bit deeper into this. So give them a bit of flavor as to what does that mean when you talk about education and financial freedom. What are the 5 key steps or the 5 key things that we talk about today that people can implement today and achieve financial freedom?
So I call it my 5 steps to financial freedom. Okay. And they're very high level, but they give you an overview. And I'm going to warn your viewers that it's not rocket science. So what I'm about to say, you've probably heard before, but we're going to just package it up as 5 steps. And I challenge you to implement these steps. So the first one is to pay yourself first. So everybody, I'm an anti-budget in case we haven't said that yet. So they're anti-budget because budgets are like diets. They're great on paper, but useless when you need them the most. So the way we overcome that is to have a system. And part of that system is to make sure that you pay yourself. So you might get paid every month and you feel that's getting paid. But you're going to go and pay some money for housing and food and all those other bits and pieces. Yeah, and that normally happens. And then there's the entertainment, the fun and all that stuff. But what people forget about is their future self. So pay yourself first means put some money aside that can be used for investing. Now, most people say, oh, that's just a budget. But I'll challenge that by saying, most people say I can save $1,000 a month in their budget and they get to the end of the month and there's no $1,000. So I build a system around ensuring the $1,000 goes out before you get a chance to spend it. So that's the first one, pay yourself first, which then leads comfortably into the second one, which is live within your means. Yeah. So we all want to have fun. We all want to keep up with the latest technology trends, all that type of stuff. But we have to be able to teach ourselves to live within our means so that we can provide for our future self when we're not going to earn an income or we don't want to earn an income. Yeah. So live within your means. And then you're gonna have what I describe as a financial shield around you in case something goes wrong. So you've got to protect yourself. And so we teach people how to have different mechanisms in place that enable safety nets to be there.
Yeah, the buffers.
But the buffers, the insurances, all those types of things that will take care of your significant others or your children or whatever it might be if something goes wrong. Then you've got that pay yourself first money, we've got to get it working for us. So that's when we get into the investing stuff. That's the fun stuff. So we're buying properties, we're buying stocks, we're buying whatever, graves, whatever it might be. To grow our money. We want our money working harder than we are.
Yeah.
And then the fifth one, and this is probably the hardest step for most people, and that's action.
Yeah. Do something.
Do something. And you mentioned it before about, the analysis and the paralysis of all that type of stuff. The biggest hurdle for a lot of people is the action step.
Yeah.
They can get the other bits, but then when it's time to pull the trigger, that gets a lot harder. I often tell the story about a particular client of mine who had a substantial amount of money to invest a little bit around this time, about October last year. And he wanted to invest it in the stock market. But he was scared that the stock market was a bit high and it was likely going to fall. And part of that was, he felt he'd missed the boat.
Yeah.
If you thought that at the start of the year, how do you feel now? Like the market's gone up, in the US it's over 30% this year.
Yeah.
Our market's up 20% this year.
Yeah.
And if you've been sitting on the sidelines, that inaction has cost you substantially. So action, and I'm very big on monthly action. Forget about the ups and downs and timing the market and all that type of stuff. When I'm talking stock market, it's time in the market, not timing the market. Property market, you've already said it. That the market doubles historically over a period of time. So there's never a bad time.
Yeah.
As long as you've got a long-term mentality.
And I love all of this, right? Whatever you've said, because it gives people a structured pathway of thinking about things, right? One of the things that I always say out loud is, and now that I've done, more than 5,000 strategies for people, right? I've seen a lot of how people save and what sort of savings do they look like. And so I talk about thresholds, and that's what I've come up with, right? So there are sort of 4 key buckets, that people spend or think in through, or should I say 3 key buckets, let's not complicate this. There is a portfolio expense, so a mortgage or, whatever your portfolio is, then you would have X percentage of money that would be allocated towards from your income. Then you would have expenses, and you would have X percentage of money towards your expenses, your daily expenses, and then X amount of money towards the saving, okay? What I generally felt, okay, based on the thresholds, is that an ideal scenario for this pie chart, if you can imagine a pie chart, is people should spend 30% of their money towards portfolio, so building up their life, okay? 30 and 40% of that would be towards expenses. So when I say 40%, I'm talking about family with 2 kids. Yeah. And then the balance of the 30% is the saving that you have a choice to either improve your lifestyle or invest more and, build even further up, right? And that is, the mechanics that I've always seen working. Now, majority of the time that I talk to people, okay, it's never that. It's never ever that, right? Because the savings are usually like maybe 10% or 5%, right? And it's so surprising, it comes back to what your financial discipline is, right? I met this client, and I'm not going to name names, and, they'll be listening to me. Beautiful couple. Between the two of them, they were close to about $240,000 a year in income. And no kids, just those 2 dogs, I think. A property which owed them, I think, about maybe $400,000 or $500,000 with a valuation about 1.2, 1.3 million. So an amazing new L. And so, of course, it looks quite handsome, right? On paper, earning good money, no kids, they must be saving quite a bit. Went to the banker's like, oh yeah, you can go out there and have a loan for $750,000, $800,000 pretty easy, right? And they come and sat in front of me, and I was, asking questions, me asking so many inquisitive questions. And so I asked them, how much do you save? And they're like, $500. I'm like, what, $500 a day, a week? What? They're like, no, a month. And I was like, Jesus, how does that work? And so I pressed the numbers, I broke down the numbers for them. And I kid you not, I think 10% of their income was going towards subscriptions, like all of these Netflix and Amazons and all of that crap, right? And I was like, look, the idea of having a transparency or a budget or whatever you call it, right, is basically to know where the money is going. It's not so much about living frugally. It's not so much about making sure that you're in check, right? You need to know where is your money going at any given point in time, and what gets measured gets managed, right? So the more you're going to look at it, I have a mentor who says this, follow the money, and it's never going to, turn around on you. Money is like a mistress. You take your eyes away and it's going to disappear, right? But make sure you follow the money, and the money was always going to pay the attention back to you, right? So
it's why I'm anti-budget as well.
Yeah.
Because a budget makes people feel restricted.
Yeah.
And as soon as you restrict somebody, they rebel.
100%.
And so with the system, my system is literally like what you just described, is putting the money where it needs to be when it needs to be there.
Yeah.
So having a plan for your money, and you're directing it rather than it the other way around.
Yeah.
And you're right, the more we earn, the more we spend too. And until you're confronted by that, you won't change it.
Yeah.
So my money management system, I don't prescribe any percentages. Yeah. I let my clients tell me what their surplus is at the end of the month, which is what their intended surplus is. And then we have a conversation about how comfortable that makes them feel.
Yeah.
So if I was talking with your clients and they said to me, I'm earning $240,000 a year and I've got a fairly good scenario, and they said I'm only saving $500 a month, that would be a conversation about, well, how does that make you feel?
Yes.
And very quickly, without having to be confrontational about it, they would recognize that $500 a month doesn't make sense for that type of income. And that then enables them to go back and reassess how they're spending their money. Have a look at those subscriptions. I described them as the leaky boat. If you don't look at it, you're just not going to know it's there. And so have a look at those things and adjust your lifestyle without curtailing and feeling restricted. You got to make informed decisions to say, do I really need 7 subscriptions to pay TV?
Yeah.
Or do I need whatever it might be, an eating out budget of $2,000 a month? Do I really need all those things? If I pare them back, will it actually restrict my lifestyle or change my lifestyle? And the answer is always no.
Yeah.
And very quickly, the 500 becomes 2,000, becomes 5,000.
Yeah.
And then they're growing their wealth, and it's a whole different ballgame that becomes fun. And then it becomes a challenge. Well, if I can save 5, what about 5.5? Or what about 6? And they just get better at it because they can see what they can do with it.
Yeah.
And I've quite often had people in tears after they've confronted themselves and their financial position to say, I just didn't realize how bad I was.
And it's so true, right? You know, like if you can't save on a lower income, what hope do you have when you're a higher income?
You have no hope. You have less hope.
Yeah, because if you are not financially disciplined when you are frugal or when you don't have a lot of money on hand, then of course living beyond the means or, you know, finding a lot of money is basically that, right? You don't have any hope on doing it. You know, one of the things that, you know, Warren Buffett, I think I heard him talking on 2 different things, you know, about, you know, budgets, etc., was that a lot of people who win lottery, it takes them 4 years to come back to where they started, right?
75% of lottery winners are worse off 5 years later than we were before.
I know, right? It's just crazy, right? It's a crazy number. The second thing, and this is what he was saying as well in one of the speeches, was even if you take whole of the net wealth of the world, okay, and you divide it into equal parts and you give it out to 7 billion people equally, it would only take 2 years for the world to come back to what it is now. Yeah, only 2 years. And that's what it takes for people to change their life completely into a much more investor focus, you know, creating the wealth, being financially free, right? And how crazy is that?
And that brings us almost full circle back to our earlier conversation about learning all this stuff for free on YouTube.
Yeah.
If you don't know how to apply that and you haven't dealt with what's going on between your ears, it doesn't matter how much free information you can get.
Yeah.
So a big part of my program is about, you know, effectively reprogramming the mind to appreciate how to apply all this so that you don't end up being one of those people that gives all your money back to those billionaires.
And look, I mean, everyone needs mentors. Like, you know, I have mentors, you have mentors. And the important thing is that for different parts of your life, you would have different people that would help you, right? You know, of course, you know, when I was, you know, young and stupid, you know, I didn't want, so still young. You don't need someone, you know, who's earning 7 or 8 figures to come and teach you, right? But what I've always felt is that, you know, my mentors are people who are 10x whatever I'm doing, right? And so my problems to them is so minute that they'll summarize my problem and a solution in a single sentence, right? And so same happens to people who are coaching other people because they've been through that scenario so quickly. It's almost like, you know, you can see the problems that you would face. You would see when you talk to some of these people, right? It's so obvious that, okay, they're going to fall into this trap, and this trap. Yeah. And so I'm just telling you now. And so it's like almost like hindsight that is happening in present, right? And so I explain to people a lot, like, this is not, you know, people trying to project, or this is not people trying to predict your future. This is people learning from their own mistakes and projecting what you would do because they are almost implementing and seeing yourself into their position, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And look, just an extension of what you said, and you and I are both fortunate enough to have some people in our life who are very good mentors. But for your listeners, like, they don't have to, because the thing I hear often is, well, I don't know anybody that's 10x better than I am. They don't have to be. They just have to be ahead of where you are.
Correct.
And know the things that you currently don't know. Or they've done the things that you're about to do and they can prevent you from doing them. So yeah, like having a coach, and I'm biased because I'm a coach, right? Having a coach and somebody who can help you walk that path more effectively and efficiently is worth its weight in gold.
Yes, definitely.
And I can say that from experience in everything. I've had coaches in everything I've ever done because I know the value.
Yes. And look, I mean, one of the things that I've said it out on a lot of other podcasts as well, that, you know, one of my biggest regret in life is not having me or someone like me when I was 19 or 20 and 21 when I was started, right? Because I would be so much more progressed and I would basically take that learning. Of course, I was stupid and silly at 21, But one thing that I did right was I took action, right? And that's what it comes down to, Even if you make a lot of mistakes, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that.
No.
But if you're taking actions, you're moving a step forward, right?
And you're taking actions and making mistakes when you're 21 is far better than taking action and making mistakes when you're 55.
100%.
Yeah, because you can recover from them like I have.
Correct.
And yeah, that's why I preach so much. And I say the word preach because I repeat myself so often. It's about taking action. I said it before, it's the hardest step for most people.
Yeah.
It's actually the easiest one, but people find it the hardest.
Yeah.
All those other things, I say, oh yeah, I've heard that before. Yeah, pay yourself first, live within your means. Heard all that before.
Yeah.
But why aren't you doing it? Because the action's the hardest.
And so when you talk about preaching, is it more about just the coaching, or is it also done for you where you're basically handling all the people's hand and basically dating with some of these things?
Oh, it's coaching, and part of the coaching is holding their hands so that when they've made decisions, they can come back and talk to me about validation and all that type of stuff. But I don't touch anybody's money. I don't make decisions for anybody.
Yeah.
I teach them how to make decisions that they're comfortable.
Yeah.
And that's the hardest part.
So it's okay to make decisions together as well.
Absolutely. Like we can come to that decision together.
Yeah.
But my clients need to know that they made that decision.
Yeah.
Because it needs to be repeatable for when I'm not there.
Of course.
Because I'm very much about a one-off education fee.
Yeah.
Or investment. I much prefer the word. They're making a one-off investment in their education. So that they can use that knowledge for the rest of time.
Yeah.
So invest when you're in your education when you're 20 and you can use it forever.
Yeah.
Invest when you're 55 to use that knowledge. Your time frame's less, but you can still do so with it.
Or pass it to someone else.
And pass it on to your kids. My program's called Wealth Generator because it's about generating wealth, but it's also about generational wealth. But I want people who have kids to pass this information on. And the crazy thing is I wrote a chapter for a book last year and went down a rabbit hole doing the research and discovered that kids between the ages of 2 and 7 form their money habits.
Wow.
So by 7, they've already got concrete money habits. Now, most people say, oh, that's crazy. You can't teach kids about money when they're only 2 to 7 years old.
Yeah.
But we are doing it every day when you say things like, when the kid asks for the lolly or the ice cream or whatever it might be, it's a teaching experience.
Yeah.
And, I then encourage, like my 16-year-old client, when they're starting to earn money, let them go and blow their first payback. Let them do whatever they want and then instill these skills so that they've got me for the rest of time.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think that investing means that, you're not allowed to have fun. You're living frugally. Everything is about retirement, but it's all about improving your lifestyle along the way, right? That's what it's all about. It's not just, hey, I'm going to turn 60 or 70 or 80 and, I'm going to drive a flashy car. It's about those constant improvements on a daily basis, right? And one of the stories that I always share out on a lot of strategies that I do is one of the first step of me thinking about going towards my retirement was me stopping to fly economy. I made a conscious decision of saying, hey, I have this passive income now from all of these investments that I've done. And so I deserve to fly business. And this was domestic only at that time. But that was a conscious decision, right? And so, I always say this, it's about the transition towards retirement. It's not just that one fine morning you're going to wake up with a newspaper in your hand and a lounge chair on the front porch and you sit down and say, hey, I'm retired. That's such an old school mentality. It doesn't work anymore.
And I mean, part of what you've just described is all that mindset where you made a conscious decision to say, not only am I going to use some of this passive income for my own enjoyment, but you made that conscious decision that from now on, I fly business class.
Definitely.
Now, even if you didn't necessarily have the funds at the time to make that decision, by making it, you turned on the other part of your brain that said, well, how do we now make that happen?
100%. Yeah, that's the manifestation. Right?
That's the manifestation, but it's also the manifestation of the action.
Yes.
That led to what do I need to do to fund us? And that's a classic Tony Robbins thing or any other guru who talks about manifestation is you make the decision, you kind of declare the decision, and then you let the brain work out how it's going to make that come true.
Yeah.
Not the other way around.
Not the other way around. And I think most of the people go the other way around. The quicker we learn about doing it the right way, which a lot of people think is the wrong way, I think the better it is. Okay, so I'm going to bring this all together because we're having a lot of fun. I think this is awesome and people are going to love this. One final piece of advice that you are going to give yours, say, 24-year-old, what would that be?
Oh, gee. One piece of it.
One piece of advice. It's like, do this, sick up. Forget everything else.
Yeah, look, we've touched on a number of different things, but if I had to give one piece of advice, it would be invest something every single month,
Okay.
irrespective of what's happening in the market, in the world, in politics, wherever. If you are consistent from as young age as possible, do that. Now, you put me on the spot with just one, but I'm going to steal a second one. And that would be obviously in order to do what I just described as that one thing, the other thing would be to get educated. Yeah. Learn, how do I apply the skills and the knowledge and all of that stuff. So how do I put the knowledge into action? That comes from getting an education. If you limit me to just one, it's take action every month.
No, definitely. And look, I think self education and investing in yourself is what I call it is very, very important. So,
Andrew, where do people find you? The easiest way to find me is theinvestorsway.com.au. There's a couple of free resources there. There's my favorite tool, which is my wealth tracker. So if you scroll to the bottom of the homepage, you'll see a link to the wealth tracker. It's a fantastic tool for just keeping a track of where you're going. If all you do is track how you're going, that's a start. And so feel free to grab that. That's my favorite tool, and it's very, very powerful.
Thank you very much, Andrew, for coming today. Mox, thanks for having me. And for viewers and listeners, if you have any stories to share of your own when you were young and silly and stupid and how you went around building financial wealth, financial freedom, financial independence, breaking the cocoon, there's various ways to go around doing that. Please do share. Thank you for listening to us today. Take care, stay safe, be kind, keep investing, keep smiling. This is Andrew and Mox checking out. Adios.
Thank you.